By Dr. Raymond Taylor. By the end of the 1st century, the Roman Empire had grown tired of revolts. The Jewish wars had left the province scorched and its people scattered. In this setting, a small Aramaic sect along the Jordan River faced a decision. Their teacher, once known for baptisms in living water and hymns of light, had been turned into a mythic figure by followers who were desperate to survive. The river religion that birthed him was being erased, so its message had to adapt. The result was a calculated literary maneuver. The prophet of water became a prophet of law. The Mandaean teacher was remade as a Jewish Messiah. This was not conversion. It was rebranding. Around the year 90, when the Gospel of John was being compiled, the Mediterranean world was full of competing movements, each struggling to define truth under Roman scrutiny. Synagogues were organized, legal, and tolerated. River cults were chaotic, unsupervised, and suspect. The Mandaeans, whose rites of immersion marked them as subversive, were often targeted as magical or rebellious. To survive, the message had to flow through safer channels. The gospel writers took their baptismal prophet, wrapped him in the garb of Jewish expectation, and introduced him as the fulfillment of Israel's scriptures. The choice was strategic. The Aramaic-speaking writers of the Gospels still smelled of the river. Their vocabulary reveals it. They spoke of living water, rebirth, light from the east, and the pearl of truth. These are not Jewish concepts. They are Mandaean. The theology of light descending into darkness, of spirit entering matter and rising again through immersion, belongs to the world of the river, not the synagogue. Yet in the Gospels, these ideas appear alongside priests, scrolls, and festivals that anchor the narrative within Jewish life. The result is a hybrid mythology that hides its origin in plain sight. The transformation was also political. To be a Mandaean in Roman territory was to risk death. The empire distrusted secretive groups that gathered by water and preached resurrection without permission. The easiest way to survive was to blend in with a recognized community. By giving their teacher a Jewish identity, the authors shielded their movement behind the legitimacy of ancient tradition. Claiming that he fulfilled the prophets turned a local mystic into a universal figure, acceptable to both Rome and synagogue. It was not theology, it was strategy. The evidence for this shift is visible in the contrast between the language of the early baptismal texts and the later Gospels. The earliest sayings about Jesus, preserved in Aramaic fragments and oral formulae, speak of immersion, light, and motion. They describe awakening through water, not salvation through blood. The Gospel of John preserves these phrases almost verbatim, but places them in new settings. The conversation with Nicodemus about being born again of water and spirit, the meeting with the Samaritan woman about living water, and the healing at Bethesda beside the stirred pool all derive from Mandaean baptismal imagery. Yet around these episodes, the editors built a Jewish framework of feasts, temples, and prophecies to disguise their origin. The river became a ritual, the baptism became metaphor, and the Mandaean voice was drowned beneath Greek and Hebrew commentary. By the late 1st century, the Jewish communities that survived the destruction of the temple were reorganizing around the synagogue. These institutions had structure, literacy, and imperial recognition. They collected tithes, recited the law, and maintained genealogies. In contrast, the river sects had only flowing water and oral tradition. Their priests dressed in white linen and sang hymns to the light, but they had no scrolls to defend their faith. When the Gospels were written, they borrowed the synagogue's credibility. The river was translated into scripture. The wet prophet was set beside Moses and Elijah so that his message could be accepted by empire and temple alike. The cost of this translation was authenticity. The Mandaean Jesus, a teacher of immersion and remembrance, was replaced by the Jewish Messiah, a figure of prophecy and sacrifice. The shift is visible in the symbolism of the sacraments. Water, the living element of rebirth, became secondary to blood and bread. The Eucharist replaced the daily immersion. Salvation became an act of belief rather than participation in the current. The living river was reduced to a metaphor, its power buried beneath doctrine, E.S. Drower observed that Mandaean theology is inherently resistant to hierarchy. The river belongs to no temple. Its current flows freely, washing priests and commoners alike. This independence was precisely what made it dangerous to empire and religion. The Gospels domesticated that freedom. By turning the river prophet into a figure who obeyed prophecy and respected law, they made him safe. They could now present him as divine while keeping him politically harmless. The result was a new religion, one that looked Jewish enough to survive and Roman enough to spread. The disguise worked. Within a generation, Christianity was no longer a river cult, but a textual faith. Its priests read scrolls instead of blessing streams. Its rituals took place indoors rather than under the open sky. Yet the Mandaean traces never vanished. The language of water, light and rebirth still runs through the Gospel of John like an undercurrent. The baptismal voice still murmurs beneath the words. When Jesus says, "Out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water," he is quoting the Mandaean hymn of ascent. When he says, "I am the light of the world," he repeats the daily invocation of the Mandaean dawn. The text could not erase its source. It could only rename it. The conversion of the river prophet into a Jewish Messiah was not an act of faith, but of survival. The editors took a living ritual tradition and dressed it in the language of synagogues to escape persecution. The result was the most successful piece of cultural camouflage in history. The Mandaean teacher, once soaked in river water, was now dressed in prophecy and parable. His robe dried, but his words still shimmered with reflection. They did not convert him, they only gave him a Jewish wig. Veritas lux mea.
Veritas lux mea.